Hello world, I'm Whitney Bandel and welcome to another video from my HTML and CSS course. In this video we will be looking at cascading style sheets. So let's start off by opening up Sublime. And we're not going to use this right away, but we want to have it open for when we're ready. And let's actually create a folder. And we're going to call this Style Sheets. We're going to create a new file. And we're going to save it into that folder. Call this index. Make it an HTML file. Hit save. So now if we go into style sheets, we should have this file. And then we are going to create another file. Hit save as. We'll do styles. This time we're going to choose CSS. Hit save. So we should have two files in this folder, index and styles. Alright, so once you have those two saved, I'm just going to move this over to the left, and we'll just keep it here for now, and we'll switch this to HTML, this we'll switch to CSS. So when you are creating code, we've talked before about HTML being the structure of what it is that we are actually creating, the wireframe, if you will. And CSS is what applies the styles, the aesthetics, the designs of how your website looks. So we're going to take a look at how we can use these in combination with each other. CSS is going to take the elements and apply specific styles to them. So if you go to Canvas, I have a couple of different links that we're going to be looking at while we are working today. I'm going to just move this over real quick. So I have CSS Zen Garden. And I'm going to actually make this full screen so we can take a look at it. This is a really great website for seeing how you can transform the HTML of a file with the CSS. So if we look through this, it says a demonstration of what can be accomplished through CSS-based design. Select any style sheet from the list to load it into this page. And then here you can download the two different files. So what is this about? There is a continuing need to show the power of CSS. The Zen Garden aims to excite, inspire, and encourage participation. To begin, view some of the existing designs in the list. Clicking on any will load the style sheet into this very page. The HTML remains the same. The only thing that has changed is the external CSS file. And then there's ways of how you can participate. So we'll just go ahead and take a look at some of these just to give you an idea of what's possible. And it's really interesting how they've changed so much and how it really creates a different type of feeling for the website, the layout, the different colors, fonts that are chosen. This one has more of a letterpress type style to it. This might be really good for like a restaurant type website where you might have a menu. So these all have the same HTML information. It's all just a difference of what is included in the CSS. So I have that link on Canvas if you would like to take a look at this in your own time, kind of see what other people have come up with. So CSS helps in several different ways. CSS helps you control styles across multiple sheets. So this is really helpful when you are working with a website and you want to have a unified style throughout the whole website. It's not a big deal to create styles for just one individual page, but when you are creating 50 or 100 pages, you want to be able to have a style sheet where you don't have to keep writing or copying the same code over and over and over again. And then if you ever want to modify that code, you can easily swap out the style sheets if you need to. It allows you to control typography in the layout. It keeps styles separate from the structure. So if you think back to the previous videos when we were working with bold or strong to change how the style of our paragraphs look, it's actually better to do this in our CSS style sheet. So that way we can keep all of the HTML, the structure in one place, and then all the styles in another. Styles can be easily stored and swapped out. Documents can potentially be smaller. This comes again from not having to copy the same code on every single page and just link to an external page that's going to house all the styles. And site maintenance will be easier again because rather than having to maintain a bunch of different pages and their individual styles, somebody can easily just swap out or update styles as needed on one sheet. So there are a couple of different methods for CSS, and where cascading style sheets get their name from is the idea that styles are going to end up kind of stair-stepping down from broad to specific. Kind of the most broad category is going to be external. And what is going to happen is as we work from broad to specific, the specific styles are going to overwrite the broad styles. When we are writing code, anything that is written is going to go in order. So you could actually have two external style sheets that are linked within the head section of your HTML, and whichever one is going to be lower down in your code is going to overwrite any of the styles that are listed in the previous one. So on and so forth with working with our broad examples to our specific. So the largest category is going to be external. This is where we would start. And here all of our files would be coded as a separate file. And that's what we are preparing to do with our styles CSS file over here, and then we have our index page. So this sheet here would end up having all of our external styles, and then we could overwrite them in our index file. And then from here we have embedded, which is defined in the head section of a web page. And then within the head section of the HTML page, you might also have imported. Imported is styles that are brought in from somewhere else, which might be used when working with typography that is hosted by another server, like a Typekit. So those two are kind of in the same category area. They're items that are going to end up in the head section of your HTML. And then most specific is going to be inline, which is going to be coded in the body of the web page as an attribute of an HTML tag. So you would go to the specific line of code and you would actually write in the head tag of that code and add an inline style to it. So when you're working with styles, you want to work in that order where you are slowly moving from broad to specific as needed. Something else to take into consideration when we are thinking about the hierarchy of these styles is there are also the browser defaults. So you could also take those into account when we are thinking of the order that these styles are being called into action. So the first thing the browser is going to do is it's going to use its own defaults, and then as it's loading your pages, it's going to move through the file, it's going to look for external styles, then it'll look for embedded and imported styles, and then your inline styles. So let's go ahead and we'll start working on our HTML, and then we can take a look at these. So if you would like to use the template, you can do that. I'm just going to type this up real quick. That'll give you a little bit of time too if you want to practice, or if you do want to copy it in. So in the head section, we are going to create space for our title, meta character set, it's going to be set to UTF-8. And then after our meta character set, we're going to create an area to place our styles. So we're going to type in style, and an opening and end tag. For our title, let's call this cascading style sheet. Before our style area, we're actually going to create a link to our external style sheet. So in order to do this, we are going to type in link, rel, we're going to say equals, then we want to have the type of link, which is going to be a style sheet. And they're going to want to link to the name, which is going to be styles.css. Make sure we end, which mine is on a new line, so just make sure that you have that end part. So this top is going to be our external style sheet. So our style is going to be linked in from here. In this area, this is where we would have our embedded styles. And then down here in the body section, once we actually have some elements, that's where we would put our inline styles. Let's create some HTML elements, and we'll go back and we'll revisit our CSS. Create an H1 that will be called cascading style sheet. And then let's make an H2 that we'll call CSS methods. And then we'll create an ordered list. And here we'll create the order that our styles will cascade. So we'll do browser defaults as our first item. Then we'll do external styles. Then we'll do embedded styles and imported styles. And then we'll do inline styles. So that way we have our actual notes inside of our text file. After our ordered list, let's make a couple of paragraphs, and we'll type in our definitions. So that way you can always go back and refer to this. So we'll type in external coded as a separate file. Do embedded will be defined in the head section of a web page. Imported, brought in from somewhere else. I'm going to put in parentheses, might be used when working with typography that is hosted by another server, like a Typekit. And then finally we'll do inline coded in the body of the web page as an attribute of an HTML tag specific to an element. So let's go ahead and hit save. And then let's run this in a browser. Alright, so we have our title from the head section up here on our tab, Cascading Style Sheet, our H1 heading, Cascading Style Sheet, our H2, CSS methods. We have an ordered list to remind us that these go in a specific order. Browser default, external styles, embedded styles, imported styles, which these two are really both in kind of the same area in the head section. And then inline styles, and then we have our definitions as kind of a reminder of which is which. So let's go ahead and add some styles. I'm going to start off by going to the external style sheet. Here we can see our browser defaults, so we've already checked that. And to create a comment at the top of your CSS, you'll type in /* your name and date, and then you'll do the opposite, */ and so that will comment out that information, so it's not actually part of your code, but you'll still be able to leave information here. So this is something I want you to do on all of your external style sheets. And this is, again, a really helpful way for you to say who's the author of the page, when it was created, any sort of comments on the subject matter of the page. You can also do this throughout your code, and you'll be required to do this on the midterm and the final project, where if you have a grouping of styles, let's say you have all of your styles for your mobile page, you would want to leave a comment saying what this particular set of styles is for as you kind of go along. Styles are made up of different rules. So our style rule basics. Sheets are made up of rules. Rules have a selector and a declaration. The selector is the HTML element, class name or ID name. The declaration is the property you are setting and the value. So an example of what this might look like, we're going to type a style for the body element. So we'll start by typing in body. So this is going to be our selector. So we're selecting what we're going to create styles for, and then we are going to use these kind of curly brackets. These are next to the letter P on your keyboard. And this is where we are going to put our declaration, which is going to have the property that we are setting and the value. So an example of a property would be background color. So this is going to be the property, and then we need to put in a colon. We're going to add a space, and then There's going to be a couple of different ways that we can choose what to write in here. CSS already has a couple of very basic colors already predefined. So if we typed in white, it's going to know what white is. This is also where, if you think back to our conversation about different colors, we could add in colors a different way. So we can use the color name, the hexadecimal color value, we can use RGB, or we could use HSL. So a couple of different ways that we could write this. I'm gonna delete this for a second. So let's say we had the example of red. We could type it this way where we're just typing in red. So this would be a complete statement. Having our selector body, we are saying that we want to change the background color, colon, and then choosing red, semicolon to end our statement, and then the bracket to kind of close off what we're looking at. So I'm actually going to hit return and add a couple of spaces. So anytime that you have information in your style sheet, information that is below, if it's talking about the same property, is going to get overwritten. So we're going to use this as an example to show how it's going to get overwritten. I like to line my styles up. You could technically have them kind of continue off down the line, but I think it's easier to scan through and read. So we're going to just keep typing in background color, just so we can see a couple of different ways of writing this. So anytime you're doing a hexadecimal value, you want to put in the £, also known as hashtag, and then put in your 6 characters. So for red, it's going to be FF0000. You can also do your letters in uppercase if you want to, so we could do this as capital FF. We need to have 6, and then our semicolon. And then we're going to do another hexadecimal. This time we're going to do F00. So this is actually the same color. There are some colors that are web safe, and what that means is because they're kind of duplicating, here we have FF twice, and then we have 2 pairs of 0, so we can actually write this as a shorthand option. And then here we're going to do background color again. This time we're going to specify RGB. So with RGB, we're going to have 3 different values. Our first one is going to be the red. And we looked at in the last video how we have the range from 0 to 255. So we have 256 different values in that range. And so if we choose 255 in the red area, in the red value, it's going to say we want as much red as possible, versus if we had 0, we would be saying we want absolutely no red. So because we want this color to be absolute red, we're going to type in our largest number in the red value area, and then we're going to type in 0 for green and 0 for blue. And when you do have values that are in parentheses like this, that are right next to a value outside of the parentheses, you want to have these up against each other. You don't want to add any spaces, or else you might get an error and it might not read. So again, we're going to do background color. This time we're going to do HSL, which is going to look at hue, saturation, and lightness. So we have a different range for HSL. In HSL, we have 360 different colors. Red is going to be the starting point, so it's going to be at 0. If you wanted to do green, it would be 120. Blue would be 240. So our first value is going to be the hue. And then we would look at the percentage for saturation. So we want this to be 100% saturated, that's going to make the color as pure as possible, just like the other settings have chosen. And then we're going to do 50% for our lightness, and that's because we don't want it to be too close to the white or black range. We want it right in the middle. So both of these can go from 0 to 100%, but this is how we're going to make them all match. So these all are going to be the same color. If we were to write a different color on these different lines, we would end up replacing the color above it. But since all of these refer to the same color, it's not really going to make any difference. They're all going to look the same. So we're going to save this in this, and we are going to refresh this and take a look. Alright, so if we now were to refresh and run this, we should see our background turn this bright red. So again, we can just type in a word. Now you can look up kind of what the defaults are, and sometimes depending on the text editor that you are using, they might kind of come up with suggestions. It looks like this one doesn't. If you're using a different text editor, if you try typing in a couple common colors like blue, light blue, sometimes there will be presets already in there, or you can kind of look up different colors to use. So if you are having a hard time linking to your style sheet, something else that you can include in this top section is type equals text /CSS. So you might want to go ahead and include that. Hit save. Alright, so this is a little bit hard to read, so let's actually go back to our styles, and I'd kind of like to keep this so that way you have it for your notes. So we might just add another style after and just overwrite all of this. So if I hit save, refresh, now it's all white again. And instead we'll add some styles to some of the other sections. So let's see, we have an H1, and you can actually create rules for several items at the same time. So we could do an H1 and an H2 at the same time. So that way we have both of these. So we could choose color. And then here, let's do blue. And you can have your parentheses on the same line if it's just one item. Usually, again, if it's several, I'll have it on a new line, so that way, and I might actually have them line up over top of each other, so that way it's really easy to scan through and find groupings. So let's save this, refresh. Now our headings are all going to be this blue color. So background color is going to affect the color behind the element, and you will see that when you have a background color, let's actually add one here as well. So we can take a look at what this might look like. I don't know if gray is going to be with an A or an E. Let's try if both work. Looks like they do. So since we're going to have multiple statements, we'll have those line up. So you'll notice that elements, unless otherwise specified, are going to go all the way across the page, and you'll notice there's some default spacing in between these. So we're going to look a little bit in the future at creating padding and margins and kind of how those work, but you'll notice kind of the container of that background space for each of these. So the text actually goes all the way up to the edge. By default, they are left aligned. So there's some space behind them. So I'm going to actually remove the background color and move this back to the same line. I just wanted to show you how these would actually stack up and how they would actually display where everything is going across. So we'll refresh that. We could also add in some styles to our ordered list if we wanted to. So you type in our order list, you could type in styles for the line items. You can also specify items within each other. So we could say we want to style the line items within ordered lists. So let's say we actually had two different types. Maybe we have an unordered list with items. So we could have these ones will have a different style than these ones. And again, everything kind of as it goes down is going to override the styles above it. So I would also suggest kind of working from broad to specific as you're working down your styles in your external sheet. So we could, I'm going to remove the unordered list because we don't have one. We could add in color here. Let's see, we could do red perhaps. And then let's do one for paragraph. Color green. Save this. Refresh. So now we have a couple different colors to work with. And as we continue working with CSS, we'll go over more styles like centering, adding again padding and margins, looking at different types of text fonts. So this is going to kind of cover everything for the external styles. We're going to go back over to the index area, and when we are working with embedded or imported styles, we're going to be typing in the style area of the head section. And you can write your code just the same way as we're doing in this CSS section. You can't do that in the rest of the HTML file, but you can do it here. So if we wanted to overwrite anything, like for example, we have our paragraph color is green, we could actually go in here and we could say that we want the color to instead be, let's say purple. So if I hit save, refresh, now it's going to show up as purple if we wanted to. We could also add styles. So let's say that on most of our pages, we want all of them to have kind of the styles that are listed over here. Maybe instead of having the color change, maybe instead on this particular page, we actually want to add a background color to it. Let's actually change this so this will be black, and then this section could be white. So here instead we'll have our definition, everything here is going to be black, and then this is going to be white. Alright, so we're not going to take much of a look at working with imported styles just because it's going to depend so much on where you're importing them. If there's a particular website that you're looking at for importing styles, they will give you directions on how you can do that, and your textbook will kind of show you. Most of what we're going to be looking at is going to be working with external styles or embedded styles. So we have an embedded style, we have our external styles. Let's move on down to our inline styles. And what we might do is, let's focus on one of our texts that actually has inline styles. So here we're going to type in style equals, and then we'll do in quotes, and we'll specify the property, then colon. Let's do green. So if we hit save, refresh, now we'll be able to actually see where this style is going to be green. We could do the same thing with our paragraph style here. We'll do style equals color green. Save this again. And then here, all of our inline styles, the text color will be green. So this would be a way for you to specify a particular part on your page. Now there are, I would say, better ways to do this. This again can be quite cumbersome where you have to go and replace every single color if you wanted to. There's kind of a better way that we can do this by using what are called classes and IDs. So after our paragraphs, let's actually create another H1. We'll type in classes, create an ampersand, and we'll do IDs. And we'll create a paragraph, say classes, allow you to create a group that all have the same properties. We'll do another paragraph that says IDs allow you to classify one particular element on a page. I'm going to make these full sentences. So I'm going to hit save, refresh, so we'll have kind of another section. So classes and IDs can be really helpful, especially when we start working with div containers, or if you have multiple elements where, let's say we have a bunch of ordered lists and we want some of them to be styled in one way and we want some of them to be styled a different way. We can actually give essentially a name to a particular area, and then we can say we want this particular group or item to all have a similar type of style. So classes will allow you to style a whole group of them. You could think of classes and IDs kind of like our class. So we have a whole class which has multiple people in it. They all are slightly different, but they all are taking this class, HTML and CSS. And then the ID would be like the individual student who is a particular person. There's no other person that's like them. If we wanted to have styles for them, there might be other instances that are similar, but we can only bring up that one person once. We can't duplicate them. So a lot of times when you are working with classes and IDs, the common rule of thumb in the industry today, a lot of times people have historically worked with IDs for styling, but because you can only use them once, a lot of times people will suggest styling using classes. Even if you are only styling one thing, it gives you the option to use it again in the future without having to change your code. A lot of times IDs are used a little bit more for working with kind of structural items, giving them names, especially when you start working with forms in JavaScript. It helps you pinpoint to something structurally. So they both are used for styles, and you can use them for styles, but kind of industry-wise, the trend that people are moving toward is focusing predominantly on classes. But we'll take a look at how we can actually work with both. So let's start off by creating a class. We might change some things around because I want to be able to use this a couple times. So we're going to actually create two headings. I think I'll change this to an H2. So we'll have classes, and then after our first paragraph, we'll do an H2 and we'll say IDs. I'm going to put a space here just so we can kind of see this as being a second group. You'll notice that if we refresh this, we won't actually see anything different. The spacing is a little different just because the default padding. So here I can type in class equals, and then I can give this class a name. I might call this group styles as class name. And so every time you want an element to be styled using a particular style, you're going to want to give it a name, and it has to be the same name. So here we'll have class equals group styles. So you're going to have it linked in your opening tag for your elements, similar to the inline styles. And then with the inline styles, it's locally going to be styled, because here we have the color in green. But we actually need to reference our class styles, and let's actually just do this in our embedded area. So it doesn't really matter which order. Again, we do want to go broad to specific. This shouldn't affect the paragraph at all because we're working with the headings, so we could just hit return and do it here. And so when we're looking at a class, we're going to do period, and then we have to make sure that we are using the same name, so group styles. And then here we would have our styles for this. So we could choose different color perhaps. We could do maybe red, so hit save, refresh. Now these are going to be red instead. So we can have as many H2 headings as we want, and you'll notice it's not going to affect our H2 heading that is above it at all. We could also add this to our external style sheet if we wanted to. So here we have our H2, so we would want to make sure that it's below it. So we could type it in right here, or we could just kind of add it to the bottom. Group styles, and we could add color red. So it doesn't matter if it's a duplicate, it'll just be the same either way. And now we can create an ID. So we can only use this once. So we might go ahead and do that on our paragraph that's on IDs. So here we type in ID is equal to, and we could type in maybe ID style. And then up here, we'll do either the, you can call it the pound hashtag. We'll type in ID style. I want to make sure. Yeah, I didn't plural it. Okay, ID style. And then, let's see. We could do color. Let's try yellow. Save. Refresh. And so now we'll have a different color again. And we can only use this once. So let's say we wanted to go up here and type in ID style. It should only work once. You can see HTML5 is pretty forgiving visually, and so it's actually showing it. Let's see what happens when we validate it. Let's see what happens when we try to validate it. Alright, so if we validate it, we get this error, and it's saying there is a duplicate ID called ID style. So this doesn't end up validating, so we can't use it twice. So I'm going to need to remove it. Whoops, wrong one. I'm going to need to remove it from here. Hit save, refresh. Alright, so this is going to cover the basic introduction of working with cascading style sheets, and we'll continue focusing on CSS in the next couple of videos.